First of all, thank you for having this discussion with me. Will
Mhm.
you tell people who you are and a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I'm Lynn Smith, founder of Migraine Insight, and my background is originally technical, so I'm a programmer. Spent the last 20 years getting out of the programmer role mostly and working as a user experience design lead. So I put together a couple different user experience departments for large companies and smaller companies, and really been steeped in trying to help people figure out how to best, like, what's the best software to build instead of how to build it, which is kind of where I started my career. So yeah, so that's my background.
Nice. Um, how many apps have you created and kind of put on the market in the stores?
Yeah. So actually, I was one of the developers that put out one of the first 1,000 apps. I think it's like 900 something. Was like I was working at a corporate job and I hadn't programmed in a while, so I actually made this little app called Text Sign that let people kind of put big text on the screen on an iPad in the early days. But I've probably been involved in about 20 launches now for apps, mostly corporate, and I have three that I've developed myself and put out. The most recent one, the company I started, Migraine Insight, and then we actually have one coming out next week called Everwell, which is kind of the evolution of the migraine app for people with other chronic conditions. So,
Nice,
yeah.
nice. We'll have to talk more about that in a little bit. What is some maybe advice that you would give a new developer as they have their app idea, maybe they
Mhm.
even have a prototype, as they're thinking about starting to move toward that launch or toward putting it in the app store? What would be some words of advice that you might give them for that
Mhm.
process?
Right. I think some of the best thing for developers to really pay attention to is first of all, just keep going. Like especially putting apps into the stores. Like they often, the most practical piece of advice is, hey, you might get notices from the store that you violate some page 13, section 5 of some guide or whatever. Everybody pretty much does that at the beginning, right? So a
Don't be
rejection is
scared of
definitely
that.
not the end. Yeah, like it can be a little bit of a battle to get your app actually into the store. Um, but have no fear. Usually eventually you just clear up what they want and you're good to go. I think you learn so much through going the process of just launching an app. A lot of people pick one platform to start with, so they'll be iPhone or Android, just to kind of get their feet wet. I'm a huge fan of if you're going to monetize the app, you want to have it on both platforms because it's like, two for one. People buy more apps on Android, but there's more people. I'm sorry, they buy apps more on iPhone, but there are more Android users. So I mean, it kind of comes out to a wash. So you kind of want to be on both platforms. Um, I think the other piece of advice I really give people is you have to pay attention to your users, right? So
Yeah.
as a developer, we see this all the time. People who are either just developing an app by themselves or even a lot of people who get funding, um, they go and they pay a lot of attention to the store listing and the sales, like the sales side of things.
Yeah.
And they pay a lot of attention to like the development side of things, like making sure they have the right technology and that kind of stuff. All very important. But they miss what I think of as the third leg of the stool, which is like, are you talking to your users? Are you making sure that what you're building is what users want? And so I think interviewing users and coming back often to just conversations, it's shocking in like corporate world and smaller startup world how much a team will put out, and I've done this myself many times, software that they're like, "Oh, we know what to build." And
Yeah.
they'll put it out and hopefully before you actually put it out, a lot of times you'll do some testing, which does not have to be complicated. And the user just uses the software in a way completely different than you planned or designed, or you don't even you ways that you would not have considered. People try to
Yeah.
do things on your software, which is often very illuminating and leads to better design. So,
Um, once you have launched, like once your product is in the store, how are you dealing with that feedback? If people are giving reviews or if they're leaving comments, do you
mhm.
take that back to your development team? And have you ever had to make changes after an app is
Mhm.
launched?
Yeah, I do. So actually, the reviews are sometimes some of the most revealing because people often give reviews when they're frustrated or aren't getting what they want accomplished done. Um, it's really hard to get people to give good reviews. And I'll just
Yeah.
a side note there, if you see an app that only has good reviews, they probably paid for them. It's something like
Yeah.
90% of the reviews on the stores at this point are fake. But people give feedback through the review process on Android or iPhone, often, asking for things that we might have on our roadmap or we might even have design, but we don't have the in the app yet. I've had a couple situations where like we found a bug the first time by reading like if somebody reviewed it and they were like, "Oh, I'm really stuck on like the barometer." Actually, this guy, it turned out he was in Canada. We didn't have it quite set up right. Um, so, and then the other way we get a lot of feedback is people who reach out to our feedback button in the app.
Mhm.
So not just the reviews, but like daily, I get people who ask questions, and then I often feed that information either into the help guide or I feed it back into the design process. And I say, okay, well, enough people now have asked why we don't like pre-populate this field over here, or like when you click this button over here, the page does something that they weren't expecting. Of course, I do user interviews. That's my background is like
Yeah.
interviewing users, but I would bet more than half of our changes and feedback and roadmap guidance comes from either store reviews or people who hit that feedback button in the app.
Okay. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about monetization because it's one
Mhm.
thing to have your app and put it in the store for free, but
Yeah.
what are some of maybe your favorite monetization models?
Right. Okay. And I'm coming at it from a bootstrapped startup standpoint. So let me put a little stake in the ground there. I don't
Yeah.
have $5 or $10 million of funding to do marketing. Um, and so with my company, we're trying to grow kind of organically. And let me just also set something else in the landscape here, which is we're a freemium model, which this is my favorite model for most apps. And there's different scenarios for different apps. But right now, if you download Migraine Insight, you get 2 weeks completely free of the whole app. And then after that, we ask you if you want to go premium. And we take the features where we have automatic pattern finding, and then some of the advanced medication tracking is premium. So we give people everything they want for 2 weeks. They can try it out. And then we ask them to pay either $9.99 a month or $59 a year. We're changing the pricing in the next week or two. It's $84 right now a year,
Okay.
but we're changing it. So I love the freemium model. One of the things as a bootstrapper is I get a lot of my customers from people who search on migraine in the store.
Yeah.
So it's incredibly important for me to be high in the ranking. So that's where I get like 80% of the people that find our app find it through the App Store. You will be put down in the ranking, or you won't be able to rise up in the ranking if you put out an app that's just premium and you have a high rate of people who download it and then don't engage in the first 2 weeks. It's like a
Okay.
thing with the app stores. So to summarize, I didn't mean to get off topic, but
No, that's good.
yeah, like I'm a huge fan of the premium model. If it's done with some free stuff up front, which works out great for everybody.
Yeah.
If you have a good app, people are going to want to use it after the 2 weeks. And with our app as well, I'll say we have a free forever level where you can track anything you want and get reports for your doctor. So you can kind of complete the basic process of what migraine people with migraine want to do, which is kind of work on that get better. And then it's kind of we have a premium level that is like a pattern finder and stuff that you don't need but is nice to have. And we've actually found with monetization that works really great too, because then people might even stay on for a month or two or 3 months and then decide that they want to come on. But if you lock it
Yeah.
down too much too quickly, people will go and use a different app. Something else I find really interesting about monetization that I didn't realize in the first kind of 6 months we were in the store, I started asking people if they downloaded other apps when they downloaded ours. And this has become typical. I've actually talked to other app developers about this. Most people, at least with tracking apps like ours, will actually download 2 or 3 or 4 apps the first day and try them all
And
out.
test them all out.
So
Yeah.
there's kind of this capture period in the first couple of weeks. If your user interface is working really well for people in the first couple of weeks, that's when you sort of capture your audience. So
Well, and that makes sense too, because you'd want to see like what feels more intuitive or more comfortable to use, and
yeah.
like somebody's app might not
Mhm.
fit that, and
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So
Cool. What made you, I don't know if this is a good question or not, but what made you kind of decide to go with that freemium model versus,
mhm.
some other subscription or some other
Right.
model?
Yeah, it's really changed actually over the years. And another model that we see a lot, well, not a lot. We used to see it, but I don't think it worked really well. So you don't see it as much anymore. Is people actually paying per report? So
Okay.
a lot of the headache trackers used to start out where like you could track all you want, but if you want to print out a report for your doctor, it's like $30 or $100. Like it was really expensive per report.
Okay.
Um, so I think, the model that we use is very typical and standard. And that's actually something I'll say as well for user experience is sometimes it's really good to go with what the user is expecting, right? So
Yeah.
trying a monetization model that seems fancy is also sort of off-putting to some users who are like, "Oh, I'm expecting to first of all have a free trial and second of all have like a monthly or an annual price." So yeah, I think it was just kind of really standard as to what everybody else does. There's a lot of nuance in the pricing. So we've tried a pricing that was lower. We used to do $4.99 a month, and then we raised it up to I think it was like $14.99. I just wanted to see. Honestly, I was like,
Yeah.
well, I don't have a lot of money again for experiments and putting out separate. Some people do pricing experiments in different ways,
Yeah.
but I was like, hey, I'm just going to take 6 months and quadruple the price or triple the price, I guess, and see how it goes. We actually ended up making equal or a little bit more money at the $14.99, and now we're going back down to the $9.99, which I think is going to be a sweet spot.
Yeah.
So everybody who signs up will be paying twice as much as before, and hopefully they're really getting value out of it. I really, but
Right.
the money goes to help us keep going, which is important to them. And then, but it's not so high. And then we also have on all of our pages where you can subscribe and it talks about the pricing, we say very clearly if you have, a problem with means to pay, please get in contact with us. Or I forget the exact term of how we use it, but basically if anybody contacts our customer support and says like I want to go premium but I can't pay for it, no questions asked. They just get a code. And it
Yeah.
only happens like one out of every 80 or 100 users because people don't it's like psychology, like people like don't want to ask for something for free, and I actually wish they would more often, but we have
Well,
like
especially because it's so helpful, and it's really taking
mhm,
it's your app is empowering people to take charge of their own health and their own,
mhm,
wellness journey. So it's super
yeah,
helpful.
thank you,
But yes,
yeah.
that's awesome. Um, how important is networking in this process of
Oh.
app development and launching your
Mhm.
own tech?
Well, that's a tricky question because I would never want to discourage anybody from networking. um I actually think it's incredibly important to like talk to other developers, bootstrappers. um Absolutely, you should be going to meetups, you should go to, like, the women's tech group that, like,
Yeah.
um, all sorts of things like that. I personally have had a very difficult time with some of the industry events that are geared more towards, funding and around that kinda stuff. The numbers, I think a lot of us are familiar with. It's like 97% of venture capital funding goes to a demographic that's like under 40, white, male, assigned male at birth. Um, Lovely people, right? But if you're outside of that demographic, your chances of getting funding, which were low anyway, nobody's entitled to funding,
Right.
are now cut like, 30, 40% of the people come, even the young women coming out of programs are female.
Yeah.
So just the numbers are not in your favor if you're a woman over 40 in the Midwest like me. So, um, again, all due respect and love to that community. But I personally found myself going a lot to networking events and spending maybe, I'd say the first 2 years, 20, 30% of my time, like pitching investors who always wanted to have meetings for the first one, but they,
Yeah.
didn't really have a lot of interest in second meetings. And I actually did a lot better with moving forward once I sort of said, okay, I'm going to take that time and effort off my plate and put it into actually developing, again, meeting with bootstrappers and finding people who are enthusiastic to do work trades. Like I've done so many work trades where like we have a podcast coming out and I traded user experience work and, that kind of thing. So there's a long-winded answer, but I think going to the right events is really helpful with the right goal.
Right. And maybe finding the right group of people that are supportive and can help
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And maybe not just trying to get investors.
Yeah. Which a lot of the networking events are kind of geared towards. They're kind of geared towards, even if they don't say so, they can kind of be geared towards that. And I would never discourage anybody from going also to try to get investment.
Yeah.
It's just really
It's
good to
very
be
difficult.
aware of what your goals are and what your chances are. So
Yeah, that makes sense. What are some of the new or like future trends in monetization that you are seeing as a developer? Is there
oh.
anything like different
Mhm.
coming out? I know you said it's sometimes good to kind of stick with traditional or expected, but like what are there any
Yeah.
new things happening out
Oh,
there?
that's a great question. And I have actually a pretty good. So I've been having conversations with a lot of people lately about tiered subscriptions. So again, I'm really steeped in the world of like subscriptions
Yeah.
for an app that's out on iPhone and Android, and how you sort of monetize those. So there's a lot of talk, and I'm actually really into it. We're going to try an experiment later this year with like trying to get the long tail of people that haven't subscribed or paid to do a much smaller sort of bite of the pie. So, for
Okay.
example, with our app, we have about 8 to 10% of the people that use it for more than a month subscribe. And again, I'm really committed to a robust free feature.
Yeah.
40% of Americans are either underinsured or non-insured in a way that they can't even really get to see a doctor.
Right.
So I feel like it's a social justice thing, and like even how that plays out with different demographics is shocking. It's just terrible. So, I'm committed to having an app that hopefully can help people a little bit, even if they kind of don't have a lot of means. But if you're thinking about the population of people that use the app who have used it longer term, maybe they've been on it for 6 months or a year, we're going to start offering, if you've been on it for over a year, you can pay 99 cents, or it might be $1.99 a year to do not the premium subscription, but just to do like to hold your data. I think we're going to promote it as like, so we're going
Okay.
to like have a tier where people will have the option to pay. Again, we'll put that out with the caveat that if you don't have the means to pay $2 a year for an app, which is pretty low, but whatever, no questions asked, like people
Yeah.
can request to, have that charge not charged. But the I've seen a lot of articles and talked to a lot of people where that actually can get a lot of results. Like people really end up taking what they call the long tail users, people who are using the app for a long time and not paying for it, kind of starting to convert some of those. So I mean, we have like 6,000 users a month right now,
Awesome.
and we have less than 500 that are paying subscribers right now. So
Okay.
yeah.
So that's a large group of people that can maybe find some value in that like introductory tier.
Yeah, and if you like convert, if we put that out and we say, hey, you can't use the app. If you've been on the app for more than 6 months, you basically are going to lose all your data. I mean, we're going to do
Yeah.
this very gently, and
Yeah.
the data is backed up. We would never lose your data, but
Yeah.
in a secure and safe and gentle way. I mean, maybe we'll convert 4 or 5,000 to $2 a year, or
Right.
whatever it is, and that's going to be a
Yeah.
really good way to capture that long tail.
Right.
So
Well,
tiered
and
subscriptions are kind of a hot new thing.
that makes sense. Well, and like it costs money to hold that data and making sure it's secure and make
Mhm.
sure that they have access to it as they need it.
Yeah,
So
right. And we
it's not
actually
too
are
much
starting
to
to
ask.
get, yeah, exactly. And we've hit that threshold where we're like, we use Firebase for our back end.
Yeah.
So quick tech stack, React Native, Firebase, MailChimp. We have a whole bunch of technologies in there, but we have hit the point where we have to start really paying for that data. every
Right.
month. It's not an enormous charge. And I'm super proud of it too. I'm like, oh, we've got to the point where we don't fit in the free
Right.
plan anymore for Firebase. I'm like,
Yes.
oh, that's like a developer like win, that makes me
Yes.
excited. But we do have to pay it.
Yeah,
So
right. It's not free.
yeah. So yeah. And shout out to Firebase. I know it's like the audience here is a technical crowd. Like I just
Yeah.
really like their data plans and how that whole back end works. So
Yeah,
yeah.
agreed. It's been super intuitive and
Mhm.
pretty easy to get started with for
Yeah.
new developers. So
Mhm.
yeah, I also
Yeah.
appreciate that. I think lastly, I would just ask, kind of on a personal note for you, like you said you have a new app that's coming out pretty
Right.
soon. So what's on your horizon? Like what does the future look like for your
Mm.
development path?
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about this. So when we developed Migraine Insight, and the origin story of that is I was working at the Mayo Clinic on a totally different app, and I get migraines, and I was talking to a neurologist, and we both agreed there was nothing really good in the store at that point for tracking and stuff. So I started Migraine Insight as something that really helps people track episodes and pain levels when they have a chronic condition, which is migraines. But from the very beginning, I was like, this should be other chronic conditions, right? Like, so it's the core of what we do is help people who have episodes sort of really look at what happened before those episodes in a way that nobody was doing before us. Um, Tracking typically in the past through all the way doctors do it, and most apps replicate that, is like when you have an episode of illness, again, migraine, you write down what happened that day or on that episode, and we really split out so that people are tracking their triggers, their potential triggers, their suspected triggers separate from
Yeah.
their episodes, and a lot of it's automated tracking, so it's like barometer reading every 8 hours or whatever. um, but my point is everything that we've done was planned from the beginning to do other conditions, so we actually have people
Okay.
using the app right now for like IBS or asthma, and we just let them go in and name their condition whatever they want. So with that kind of description, Everwell is going to be the new app, and we had to change a couple setup screens, but basically the experience is the same. And so Everwell is going to be coming out. Let's call it 2 weeks. Software development.
Okay.
We're in final testing. It might come
Right.
out next week. But if I even say that, knock on wood, of course we'll find a bug that takes a week to fix.
Right.
How it goes.
You're right.
But I'm really excited about Everwell coming out. We literally have people who have migraines, and we're like, I really want to use this app for a different condition. And I tell them, oh, you can go into settings and you can add up more than one condition, even in Migraine Insight. But we already have an audience that's already pretty primed and
Yeah.
excited for the Everwell launch in a couple weeks. So
So is it almost going to be like a little bit of A/B testing for you to see like is it better to have a
mhm,
more like general app that does this thing or
mhm,
a tailored kind of niche
right.
marketed app?
Yeah, right. That's a great question. So we're going to put out Everwell, and we're going to put out some ads. And our ad strategy right now is generally Google ads.
Yep.
And then we also do iPhone as App Store ads.
Okay.
Google Ads actually works for the Android store. Like that's where you place your ads. So I'm very into store promotion. Like we get so much of our audience off the store anyway.
Yeah, you said
Um,
about 80%.
yeah, from people
Okay.
just searching on migraines in the App Store. So we're going to be doing long and short of it. We're going to do some really early experiments to see if we can drive people who have IBS, IBD, asthma, hives, skin conditions, food intolerance. We have like a list of like 8 or 10 conditions.
Yeah.
Like, can we use those keywords to drive people to Everwell? If we can, then we're going to just stick with Everwell.
Okay.
We built it in like a white label way where we could actually put out Everwell IBS, Everwell gastro, Everwell
Okay.
food intolerance, so that we would have separate apps and that would work into like the keywords in the store. Um, so what I'm trying to say is I'm not sure yet if it's going to be an app suite where we have like 8 to 10 apps, or if it's just going to be Migraine Insight will eventually actually sunset, and we'll try to
Okay.
drive everybody to Everwell. Um, a lot of that actually comes down as well to like not really having a lot of funding for marketing.
Right.
So being able to draft off, have like, ranking really high on a keyword is the core of our marketing strategy right now. So,
Right.
yeah.
What kind of tools are available for like tracking those kinds of metrics and things? Do the app store platforms give you
Mhm.
that data to kind of go in and
Yeah,
see how you're ranking and that kind of thing based on
right.
keywords?
Yeah, so the app stores do give you some tools for that, and they're pretty good. Um, Google Analytics we also use because it works with Google Ads, so we use Google
Yeah.
Analytics. The other thing that I've been using lately, and it's a little bit less about keyword tracking, just shout out to it, is Mixpanel. So we actually do we use this tool called Mixpanel to go in and see when people are purchasing. So if you think of our sales funnel, like getting people to download the app for free is kind of what I think of as the first 2/3. And
Yeah.
then the last third of our sales funnel is in the app. Like, how do we get people to actually purchase? So I love Mixpanel for being able to do workflows and see who's clicking on what button and how many days they've had the app and that sort of thing. But to
Cool.
answer your original question, Google Analytics as well as the store panels. And there's better tools out there. It's like on our roadmap actually to find some because the things that I just described to you don't really give me what I want exactly. And
Yeah.
we actually should be more of a data driven marketing advertising. Um, so you can like GA4 they call us like Google
Yep.
Analytics upgraded to a different package. Is just everybody says, and I completely agree at this point, very cumbersome. So all the data's in there of
Right.
like who had the original first campaign that they saw that they were
But
driven to our app.
getting it out of there
Yeah,
is so
I
hard.
have a technical background and
Yeah.
I get flummoxed. So there's kind of a question mark for me as to whether Google Analytics is going to be able to give us the reports we need to really
Yeah.
know which ad campaigns are returning. Um, the other thing I'll say about that is actually Google Ads itself is where we go to right now for that information.
Okay.
So, and Google Ads, by the way, hooks into Firebase as a back end. So I can tell you right now when somebody the first ad that they clicked on all the way through did they purchase, right?
Wow.
So when I look at a report right now, I can tell you which campaign is kind of performing well. From like Google Ads, I can look at my list of campaigns and keywords and that kind of
Yeah.
thing, and I can see who purchased. I actually want to know more information in the middle.
Yeah.
How many days did it take? How many times did they see what ads? That kind of stuff. And all that information is kind of missing for me right now. So
Okay.
I'm actually looking for a better tool.
Okay. Well, I will keep my ears open.
Yeah.
That awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. Are you available on social media or how can
Mhm.
people reach you if they have questions or want to help your mission?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is such a great discussion, and I'm just really be thrilled to be asked. So I am definitely on social media. LinkedIn is a great way to get in touch. So reaching out on LinkedIn, on our website, so Lynn at migraineinsight.com. I'm actually on email a lot too. So that's a good way to reach out. Yeah, I think that's the two main ways to reach out. And
All
I
right.
love questions. I love talking to people. I love feedback on the app more than anything. But honestly, like if anybody has questions or just has anything they want to follow up with, I'm very open for a LinkedIn or email reach out. So
Cool. Thank you so much. I
yeah.
really appreciate you helping us and sharing
Mhm.
your knowledge with us.
Yeah. Thank you again.